Hey friends, if you've been wanting to sew your own clothing but don't know where to start, this is the perfect place. Today, I'm showing you how to make a super simple shirt that you can finish in about an hour. This project is totally beginner friendly, no fancy techniques, no confusing patterns, just a fun, easy shirt you'll actually want to wear. So grab your fabric, thread that machine, and let's sew this thing together, step by step. You've got this. This pattern can be purchased as a PDF instant download from my website, and you'll find a link in the description below. The design is a tunic-length, easy-fitting t-shirt with the hem hitting about mid-thigh. It also has a panel in the center back, which opens up some options for color blocking or mixing fabrics. The pattern takes full advantage of the flexibilities that knit fabric offers because it has raw edge hems and built-in kimono sleeves, which make it quick and easy to assemble. I'll demonstrate how to assemble it using only a basic sewing machine, but more advanced sewers can adapt the process for using a serger. If you're watching this video, I'm going to assume you're very new to sewing, so I'm going to spend a lot of time on the step-by-step instructions. For the more advanced sewers, feel free to skip the parts of this video you don't need, or you may even be able to sew up this pattern without the video tutorial since it's a simple design. The pattern includes 3 file types: a letter-sized format for at-home printing, an A0 file for plotter printing, and a layered projector file. If you're beginning your sewing hobby, you'll probably want to use the home printing file, which allows you to print the pattern on any standard home printer. Basically how it works is that you print a bunch of small pages, then piece them together with tape to make one large pattern. The dashed lines around the outside of each page are the lines where you'll piece the pages together, and anything outside the dashed lines is not part of the pattern. You'll find an assembly diagram on one of the pages that looks like this, which you will follow to put the pages in the correct order. Important note here is that you need to print at 100% scale or actual size. Otherwise, your pattern won't be the correct size and may not fit you. Measure these squares at the top of each page with a ruler to ensure that your pattern is printed correctly. This format is common for digital sewing patterns, and I created a separate video linked below which walks you through the printing and assembly in more detail. The different sizes are indicated by color based on chest measurement. Now let's talk about fabric and supplies. You'll need lightweight jersey knit fabric and 1 or 2 spools of matching all-purpose polyester thread. For the thread, you're looking for 100% polyester thread. The popular brands are Gutermann and Coates & Clark. For any of the supplies mentioned in this video, I'll drop my Amazon affiliate links below so you can see examples of what you need. I earn a small commission through those links to help support my channel at no extra cost to you. For fabric, some suitable options include cotton jersey, brushed jersey, or ITY knit. You're looking for something lightweight and stretchy. On your screen and on your pattern, you'll find the yardage requirements to get an idea how much fabric you should purchase. If you're a beginner, it's a good idea to purchase extra in case you make a mistake. The yardage chart is based on fabric that is 60 inches wide, which is common for jersey knits. Just make sure to double check the fabric width before you order, or you might not have enough. Stripes or directional fabric may require additional yardage, and they also make the sewing more complicated. So I recommend for beginners to start with a solid color or all-over random print. Next, let's talk about the stretch of the fabric, which is a really important concept for this project. When you're working with stretchy knit fabric, you want the greatest stretch of the fabric to go around the body on your finished garment. You'll notice on each of your pattern pieces there is a long arrowed line which indicates the direction of greatest stretch. Normally, knit fabric stretches more in one direction than the other, so you want to keep that in mind when placing your pattern pieces on the fabric to cut it out. Most of the time, the greatest stretch runs between the finished edges of the fabric, perpendicular to the cut edges, as shown in this diagram. You can also double-check the stretch by manually pulling the fabric between your fingers in both directions. It should be really easy to tell which direction has the greatest stretch. The most common way to cut fabric starting out is to pin all your pattern pieces to the fabric, then cut out with scissors. However, When it comes to cutting knits, I highly recommend using a rotary cutter, weights, and a cutting mat. It's a faster method and the fabric doesn't shift around as much, which can lead to inaccurate cutting. The important thing is that you need to be super careful because a rotary blade is really sharp, so don't put your fingers in front of the blade while cutting. I'll leave links to some of my recommended cutting supplies below, and you can use any random objects you have, like canned goods, for weights. Lay out the fabric so it's smooth and flat without any wrinkles. Place your pattern pieces on the fabric, being mindful of the direction of greatest stretch. Also note that some of the pattern pieces are cut on the fold of the fabric indicated by the marking shown here. That means you fold the fabric and you place the pattern piece with the edge lined up on the fold. You cut 2 layers at one time, then open up the fabric to get the full piece you need. If you have a large enough cutting mat, you can lay out multiple pieces at one time before you cut. Be careful and intentional here. Check twice and cut once. It stinks when you make a cutting mistake because it could waste your fabric. When cutting the hem edges at the bottom of the shirt and the sleeves, make sure to cut cleanly. Since we're going to leave the edges raw, we don't want the fabric to be jagged. After cutting the shirt front, which is one of the pieces cut on the fold, take your scissors and place a tiny snip at the neck opening directly on the fold line. This clip will mark the center front, which we will need later to match things up during sewing. When cutting out the side back pieces, make sure, after you cut the first one, you flip the pattern piece over to reverse it on your fabric. That's because the 2 side back pieces are mirror images. For the shirt center back panel, place a tiny clip with your scissors directly on the fold edge at the neck opening, same as for the shirt front. This image shows what the shirt front and collar look like after cutting. And this one shows the 3 back pieces. You should have 5 pieces cut in total if you did everything correctly. The sewing machine I'm using in this video is the Singer Heavy Duty, which is an inexpensive entry-level machine. I've used it for several years and find it to be a reliable and easy-to-use machine. There's also tons of videos here on YouTube that can teach you how to thread and use this machine. For the first several seams, we'll leave the machine set on a basic straight stitch with a 2.5 stitch length, which is the standard setting. The thread tension and needle position may need adjustment if you have a different model machine, but I'm going to leave them at setting 4 tension and middle needle position, which is the standard setup for this machine. This sewing pattern uses 3/8 inch seam allowances, which means when you stitch your pieces together, the edge of the fabric needs to be 3/8 of an inch away from the needle on the right-hand side of the presser foot. The machine does have lines indicating the different seam allowances, but I find it's easier to see if you put a piece of masking tape to mark the seam allowance line. Another important note is that you need to buy a special needle to work with stretchy knit fabric. The needle that comes with the machine is probably a universal needle, which is designed to work well on a variety of fabrics, but it usually results in skipped stitches on jersey knits. For this project, you'll want to replace the needle with a ballpoint needle or stretch needle. Check the links in the description below for examples. Finally, one other piece of guidance is that you should save all your cutting scraps and test your stitching on them first before you do any real sewing on your shirt. This way, you can catch any weird stitching or other problems before doing the real thing. This tip will save you a lot of heartache and pulling out stitches later, and I wished I would have learned it earlier. Now that you've done all that prep work, it's finally time to get sewing. First, we're going to assemble the back of the shirt. Typical seams are made by placing the fabric right sides facing before going to the sewing machine. Place one of the back side pieces on the back center panel like I'm showing you here, and then match the edges nicely with pins or sewing clips. Keeping our 3/8 inch seam allowance in mind, start at the edge of one end of the seam. In order to keep the fabric from getting bunched up under the presser foot at the beginning, you will likely need to pull the thread tails gently to the back of the fabric. The key word here is gently and not forcefully. After taking a few stitches, hold down the button to reverse the stitching for 2 or 3 stitches. You will want to do this back tack at the start and stop of every seam to make them secure. There's no need to get in a hurry here. Stitch slowly, keeping the fabric edges lined up with the 3/8 inch seam line. And remove the sewing clips or pins when you get close to them. Let the machine pull the fabric through at its own pace. You don't need to give it any extra help once you get past the beginning stitches. Once you get to the end, reverse for 2 or 3 stitches to secure the end of the stitching. When you cut your thread, leave long thread tails coming from your machine to use when you start the next seam. Once the fabric is opened up, you'll see we have a completed seam. Repeat the same process over again to attach the other side to the center back panel. With the back fully assembled, we can now attach the back to the front at the shoulder seams and side seams. Place the front on the back with right sides facing, then use pins or sewing clips to match all the edges. These are the 4 seams we will stitch next. At the underarm point, you will pivot to change direction, which I will show you shortly. Sew the underarm and side seam starting with the sleeve. Once you get to the underarm point, you're going to keep stitching straight for 3/8 of an inch. Then stop with the needle down in the fabric. Leaving the needle down, raise the presser foot and pivot the fabric so that you're stitching down the side seam next. Then, continue stitching along until you reach the end. Repeat the same process for the other side of the shirt. Don't forget to reverse for a few stitches at the start and stop of your stitching to secure the seam ends. Next, before you turn the shirt right side out, grab your fabric scissors and we need to make 2 small clips. Right at the underarm point on each side, you want to clip into the fabric diagonally. Clip carefully all the way up to your stitching, but don't cut through it. Placing these clips here helps relax the bulk of the fabric at the underarm so it doesn't bunch. After that, turn your shirt right side out. Then we'll move on to our final step, which is attaching the neckband. Fold the neckband in half, right sides facing, and match the short edges together. Then, stitch these with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Next, open up the seam you just made. Pressing it with your fingers should be just fine. Then, fold the neckband wrong sides facing so that the remaining long raw edges match together. At this point, I like to press the neckband with steam and a press cloth so that it holds that fold in place. That will be the top edge of the neckband on your finished shirt. Now, before we attach the neckband, we need to use the quartering method. That means we're going to mark quarter points around the neckband and then the neck opening on the shirt. Those markings will serve as guides so that we can match everything nicely when we attach the neckband. On the neckband, use the seam you just made as your first quarter point. Then, lay it flat with the seam on one side. The fold opposite the seam is quarter point 2. Pinch the fold and mark it with a piece of chalk. Next, turn the neckband loop so that the quarter points 1 and 2 match in the middle. The folds on the left and right are quarter points 3 and 4. Now you have 4 quarter points around your neckband that are equal distance from one another. Now, we need to apply the same concept to the neck opening. You should already have tiny clips at the center front and center back neckline that you made during the cutting at the beginning. So you already have your first 2 quarter points. Match the notches in the middle. Then, walk the raw fabric edges together to find folds on the right and left sides, which are your quarter points 3 and 4. Important note here, these quarter points are not the same as the shoulder seams. They should actually be a little bit below the shoulder seams on the front side of the shirt. Now that we have 4 equal distant quarter points on both the neckband and the neck opening, we'll be able to match them perfectly when we attach the neckband. Pull the shirt up inside the neckband so that you are matching 3 raw edges together. 1 raw edge on the neck opening, plus the 2 raw edges of the neckband. Place the seam in the neckband at the center back of the shirt. Match the remaining quarter points with pins or sewing clips. Next, we will stitch the neckband to the neck opening. This time, we will sew in the round, unlike all the seams before, which were done flat. For this next step, we do want to change the settings on our machine. A straight stitch won't work for attaching the neckband because the opening needs to expand to fit over your head or the stitching will pop. We need to switch to a zigzag stitch. I'll leave my stitch length set at 2.5, but set the stitch width to about 3.5. Let's also pull off the accessory box to leave just the free arm of the sewing machine, which is easier for stitching in the round because you can slide the neck opening right onto it. Start stitching at the center back of the shirt, where you place the seam in the neckband. You'll want to really take your time here because this is probably the hardest part of the whole project. We're still going to use the same 3/8 inch seam allowance, and you don't need to reverse your stitching at the beginning because it will get overlapped after you stitch all the way around. Unlike the previous seams, on this one you will apply a very gentle stretch to the neckband. The neckband is slightly smaller than the neck opening by design, so you will have to stretch it a little bit to make it match. The key here is to stretch just a little bit, not a lot. Remove the sewing clips as you get close to them and keep checking to make sure you have all 3 raw edges matched. When I approach a shoulder seam, I like to check the underside of the fabric and make sure that seam is opened up. It helps to reduce bulk at the shoulder, but it's not the end of the world if you accidentally stitch the seam to one side instead. Once you come all the way back around, overlap your starting stitches by a 1/4 inch or a little more. After clipping your threads, turn the neckband out and take a look at the seam line from the outside of the shirt. If you attached it correctly, the seam will be smooth with no pinches or gathers in the fabric. If you do have any pinched fabric, you'll need to unpick those stitches at that part and restitch it. We're almost finished, just one more step. For the next part, we'll switch to a staggered zigzag stitch. We'll set the stitch length at 2 and the stitch width all the way up at 6. This step will create a more professional neckband by stitching the bulk of the seam down flat. Slide the neckband back onto the free arm of your machine, starting at the center back again. We don't have a seam allowance line to follow here, so we will line up the seam line between the shirt and the neckband with the right-hand side of the presser foot. Make sure the bulk of the seam allowance we just made is facing away from the neckband underneath. You won't be able to see it, but you should be able to feel with your fingers to make sure it's laying correctly. Stitch around slowly and gently, spreading the seam apart as you stitch. Keep checking to make sure that the fabric layers underneath are laying toward the left. Notice that I'll keep feeling with my fingers to check. When I get to the shoulder seams, I like to check underneath again to make sure that the seams are open so everything lays flat on the finished shirt. After stitching all the way around, I'm going to reverse my stitches a little to make sure everything is secure. Here's what the finished product looks like. You'll see 2 rows of stitching on the inside of the shirt, but only 1 on the outside. And with that, your shirt is complete. Congratulations! With a little more practice, you'll be sewing up tons of these in every print and color. Normally, at this point, you would hem the sleeves and the bottom edge of the shirt, but since we're using knit fabric, it's perfectly fine to leave a raw edge. Knit fabric is amazing because it doesn't normally ravel like a woven fabric, so it's perfectly acceptable to leave the edge raw. Just to give you some inspiration for your own creations, let's take a look at these ones that I made. This one is a green stretch lace, and something that's really cool about this fabric is that it came with a finished ribbing. So I lined my pattern piece up with the finished ribbing on the fabric and made it the hem. And then I also used that ribbing to make a neckband. So that was really cool. And then on this one over here, the center back panel, I decided to insert a mesh to give it some airflow and just make it kind of a cool design detail. And if you're really more of a beginner sewer, I definitely recommend going with a fabric like one of these that's an all over kind of print versus like a stripe or something directional, because that's going to help cover up any little imperfections you make because the print is so busy. And that's it. Your 1 hour shirt is done. How fun was that? If you're new to sewing, I hope this showed you how doable it really is. Don't worry if yours isn't perfect. Every project gets better with practice. And hey, now you've got a handmade shirt to show for it. If you had fun sewing with me today, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe for more step-by-step sewing tutorials. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy sewing!